It happened. 45 minutes ago, while most of the Western world was asleep, China declared economic war on the American financial system. What I'm about to show you will explain why silver just shattered through $103 per ounce, why it's headed to $150 within weeks, and why the metal you think exists in Western vaults has already been shipped east, quietly, systematically, over the past 18 months. The vaults are empty, the paper is worthless, and China just locked the door behind them. That's not hyperbole, that's mathematics. At 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, China's Ministry of Commerce published Notice Number 2026-017 on their official government website. The document, which I have translated and independently verified through two separate Mandarin-speaking analysts, announces an immediate and total export ban on refined silver, silver concentrates, and silver-containing compounds to all nations classified under China's unfriendly states designation. That list includes the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, every European Union member state, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. In other words, the entire Western Economic Alliance has just been severed from Chinese silver supply with the stroke of a bureaucratic pen. Now, you might be thinking, so what? We can source silver from other countries. And that response reveals exactly how little most people understand about the global silver supply chain. China controls 43% of global silver refining capacity. They don't just mine silver, they process it. Raw ore from Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, and a dozen African nations flows into Chinese refineries, gets processed into 999 fine silver, and then gets distributed to global markets. Without Chinese refining, the ore is just rocks. And as of this morning, not a single refined ounce is flowing west. But here's what makes this announcement genuinely terrifying, and why I've been on the phone with sources across 3 continents for the past 6 hours. 72 hours before this export ban was publicly announced, I received intelligence from a contact inside the Shanghai Futures Exchange. This is someone who has given me accurate advance information on 3 previous occasions, including the COMEX rule change in November and the LBMA audit delay in December. This source told me the ban was coming. They told me the exact date, and they told me something else. Something that transforms this from a trade dispute into a calculated financial attack. According to my source, Chinese state intelligence services have obtained internal audit documents from London Bullion Market Association vault operators. Those documents reportedly show that registered silver inventory in London has collapsed to levels that cannot mathematically support outstanding paper obligations. The vaults are running a fractional reserve system at ratios exceeding 100 to 1 in some cases. China knows this, they've known it for months. And the export ban isn't defensive, it's offensive. They are deliberately forcing a delivery crisis to expose the Western paper market as the fraud it has always been. My source put it this way, and I'm quoting directly, Beijing has wargamed this scenario for 18 months. They know COMEX is leveraged beyond recovery. They know London is functionally empty. The export ban is timed to maximum effect. They're not protecting domestic supply, they're detonating the Western financial system's confidence in paper metal. Let me show you the price action that confirms this isn't speculation. As I'm recording this, COMEX silver is trading at $103.47, up 11.20 from yesterday's close. That's a 12.1%. Single-day move. For context, silver hasn't moved this much in a single session since the 2011 parabolic run. Before that, you have to go back to the Hunt brothers squeeze in 1980. We are in historically unprecedented territory, but price isn't even the most important signal. Volume is. In the first 4 hours of trading, COMEX silver futures have exchanged 847,000 contracts. That's more volume than the entire previous week combined. Somebody, or more accurately, many somebodies, are panic buying paper silver, desperately trying to secure claims on metal that increasingly doesn't exist. Meanwhile, the physical market has already decoupled. Shanghai physical silver is trading at $118 per ounce as I speak. Dubai dealers are quoting $121. Singapore is at $119. That's a $15 to $18 premium over the supposed official COMEX price. The paper market and the physical market are no longer the same market. And with China's refining capacity now locked behind an export wall, that divergence is about to become a chasm. The West is staring down a silver supply crisis unlike anything in modern financial history. Let me show you exactly how deep this goes. Let me walk you through China's official export ban notice line by line, because the specific language they've chosen tells us everything about their strategic intentions. Article 1 of Notice 2026-017 states the following: in accordance with the Foreign Trade Law of the People's Republic of China and the Export Control Law, the following silver products are hereby prohibited for export to designated nations, effective immediately: refined silver, classified under Harmonized System Code 7106.91, silver powder, HS Code 7106.92, silver concentrates derived from mining operations, and silver compounds containing greater than 10% silver content by weight. That last clause is the one that should terrify industrial supply chain managers across America and Europe. Silver compounds containing greater than 10% silver content means China isn't merely banning silver bars and investment products. They're banning the silver paste used in solar panel manufacturing. They're banning the silver brazing alloys used in electronics assembly. They're banning the silver oxide compounds used in medical devices and batteries. This is a full-spectrum embargo on silver in virtually all its industrial forms. Article 3 provides the official justification, and the language here is deliberately strategic. This measure is implemented to safeguard national resource security and ensure domestic supply chain stability for strategic industries including photovoltaic manufacturing, semiconductor production, and defense applications. Read that again. Defense applications. China has officially classified silver as a strategic defense resource. This is the same classification they apply to rare earth elements, the same classification that allows them to weaponize supply chains against geopolitical adversaries. This export ban isn't a temporary trade measure that will be negotiated away in 6 months. This is a permanent restructuring of how silver flows through the global economy. Beijing is telling us, in plain bureaucratic language, that silver is now a weapon. And they've just aimed it directly at the West. But the official document only tells half the story. What it doesn't reveal, what my sources have confirmed through back channels over the past 72 hours, is that China has been preparing for this moment for over 2 years. I've spoken with a metals trader at a major Chinese state-owned bank, a logistics coordinator at the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, and a senior analyst at a Hong Kong commodities fund. Their accounts are consistent and alarming. Since January 2024, China has been systematically draining silver from Western markets through a network of intermediary purchasers. They've routed acquisitions through Malaysia, Thailand, the UAE, and Singapore to avoid triggering surveillance algorithms that monitor large direct purchases. They've used a constellation of shell companies and third-party trading houses to obscure the ultimate destination of the metal. Conservative estimates from these sources suggest China has accumulated between 400 and 600 million ounces of physical silver over this 24-month period. To put that in perspective, total COMEX registered inventory currently stands at 31.2 million ounces. Total LBMA vault holdings are approximately 723 million ounces, but the vast majority of that is already allocated to ETFs and institutional accounts that will never surrender their metal voluntarily. When you do the math, when you subtract ETF holdings, central bank reserves, and industrial user stockpiles, the free float of actually available silver in Western vaults is somewhere between 50 and 80 million ounces. At current global industrial consumption rates of 1.2 billion ounces per year, that represents approximately 3 weeks of supply. 3 weeks. That's what stands between the Western financial system and a complete silver supply failure. And China just eliminated 43% of the pipeline that was supposed to replenish those inventories. Now let me explain why this creates a checkmate, rather than merely a difficult position. Because understanding the structure of the silver supply chain reveals why there's no easy escape. Most people assume silver works like other commodities. If one source dries up, you simply source from another. But silver has a unique vulnerability that makes it fundamentally different from copper or iron or even gold. Approximately 70% of global silver production is generated as a byproduct of base metal mining, copper, lead, and zinc operations that produce silver as a secondary output. Primary silver mines account for less than 30% of annual supply. This means you cannot simply produce more silver in response to a shortage. Silver production is structurally tethered to base metal economics. If copper prices don't justify expanded mining, silver supply doesn't increase regardless of how high silver prices climb. The supply curve is inelastic in a way that most commodities are not. And here's where China's strategy achieves its full devastating elegance. The West mines silver ore. The West consumes refined silver in industrial applications. But the West does not refine silver in meaningful quantities. American refining capacity handles less than 5% of global throughput. We have outsourced the critical transformation step, the step that turns raw ore into usable metal, almost entirely to China. We shipped them our industrial base in exchange for cheap consumer goods, and now they've converted that dependency into leverage. The export ban isn't a negotiating tactic. It's an exploitation of a structural vulnerability that Western policymakers created through decades of short-sighted offshoring, and there is no quick fix. Building refining capacity takes years and billions in capital investment. Permitting a loan would take 18 months in the current regulatory environment. China has 3 weeks' worth of Western silver supply held hostage. And they're not asking for ransom. They're watching us scramble. The question everyone should be asking right now isn't just what happens next. It's how did we get here? How did the West become so catastrophically dependent on Chinese silver refining that a single export notice can threaten the stability of our entire industrial economy? How did we sleepwalk into a strategic vulnerability this severe without anyone raising the alarm? The answer lies in 4 structural forces that have been compounding for 3 decades. Each one, in isolation, was manageable. Together, they created the perfect trap, and China just sprung it. The first force is the green energy silver demand explosion. This is the trap that Western governments built for themselves with their own climate policies. The solar photovoltaic industry currently consumes approximately 170 million ounces of silver annually. In 2015, that number was 50 million ounces. That's a 240% increase in less than a decade, and the growth curve is steepening, not flattening. Every solar panel manufactured requires approximately 20 grams of silver paste to create the conductive pathways that convert sunlight into electricity. There is no substitute. Copper doesn't work. Aluminum doesn't work. The physics demand silver. Now consider the policy environment. The European Union's Green Deal mandates 750 gigawatts of new solar capacity by 2030. The United States Inflation Reduction Act provides hundreds of billions in subsidies for domestic solar installations. Every Western government has locked itself into legal commitments requiring massive expansion of solar infrastructure over the next decade. These commitments were made with absolutely no consideration of where the silver would come from. Politicians signed documents promising a solar-powered future while remaining blissfully ignorant that 43% of the refined silver needed to build that future flows through Chinese facilities. Beijing didn't create this dependency. Western policymakers created it through a combination of climate ambition and supply chain negligence. China is simply exploiting the vulnerability that was handed to them. The second force is the military-industrial silver crisis. This one rarely gets discussed publicly because the implications are too uncomfortable for defense officials to acknowledge. Silver is not optional in modern weapon systems. It is essential. Tomahawk cruise missiles contain silver in their guidance electronics. F-35 fighter jets use silver in electrical connections throughout the airframe. Satellite communication systems, radar installations, missile defense networks, and encrypted communications equipment all require silver components. The Department of Defense consumes approximately 15 million ounces of silver annually across its various programs and contractors. A Congressional Research Service report published in late 2024, a document I've obtained and reviewed in full, contains this warning. United States defense supply chains remain critically dependent on Chinese refined strategic materials, including silver, rare earth elements, gallium, and germanium. Disruption of these supply chains would materially impact the production timeline of multiple major weapon systems. The Pentagon knew. The intelligence community knew. They published the warning in an official government document, and nothing was done. No strategic stockpile was established. No domestic refining capacity was built. The warning was filed, forgotten, and now we're watching the consequences unfold in real time. The third force is the paper market fraud that has suppressed silver prices for decades. The COMEX Futures Exchange in New York and the London Bullion Market Association have operated a paper silver market where the ratio of paper claims to physical metal ranges between 100 to 1 and 300 to 1, depending on which analyst you consult and which methodology they employ. This system functions through an elegant deception. As long as contract holders roll their paper positions forward rather than demanding physical delivery, the shortage never becomes visible. The game continues indefinitely, but China's export ban changes the mathematics entirely. When industrial users cannot source refined silver through normal supply channels, they turn to COMEX and LBMA as backup sources. When investors see a supply crisis developing and lose confidence in paper claims, they demand physical delivery to secure real metal. Suddenly, you have hundreds of paper claims chasing each physical ounce. And when the delivery requests exceed vault inventory, the entire facade collapses. China has seen the internal audit documents. They know the Western vaults are running fractional reserves at ratios that would make a Ponzi scheme operator blush. The export ban is timed precisely to trigger a delivery crisis that exposes the fraud. The fourth force is strategic timing. China did not wake up yesterday and decide to impose an export ban. This operation has been planned for at least 18 months, probably longer. The timing is surgical. The United States is politically fractured, heading into a contentious period. European unity is strained by energy costs, migration pressures, and divergent national interests. The Western alliance is weaker and more distracted than at any point since the Cold War. Meanwhile, China has spent 2 years quietly stockpiling silver, securing alternative supply arrangements through Russia and Central Asian partners, and preparing domestic industry for complete self-sufficiency. They've stress-tested their own systems. They've built buffer inventories. And crucially, they've coordinated with Russia, which announced its own export restrictions on platinum and palladium to unfriendly nations just 11 days ago. This is not an isolated trade action. This is coordinated resource warfare executed by adversaries who planned their moves while the West was distracted by culture wars and election cycles. The trap has been building for 30 years, it just closed. Now that you understand how we arrived at this moment, let me map out exactly what happens over the next 30, 60, and 90 days. These aren't predictions based on speculation. This is game theory applied to commodity markets under stress. When you eliminate 43% of refined supply from economies that consume 60% of global silver, there are predictable consequences. They will unfold in 5 waves, and the first wave has already begun. The first consequence is the industrial panic. Within 72 hours of this export ban, which means by the end of this week, every major industrial silver consumer in North America and Europe will be in crisis mode. Supply chain managers at Apple, which consumes approximately 3 million ounces of silver annually for iPhone production, are already on emergency calls with their metals procurement teams. Tesla, which uses silver in every vehicle for electrical contacts and battery interconnects, is scrambling to assess inventory levels. First Solar, the largest American solar panel manufacturer, burns through 8 million ounces per year under normal production schedules. These companies cannot operate without silver. Their production lines stop. Their contractual obligations to customers become impossible to fulfill. And when corporate procurement departments realize that Chinese supply is gone and Western vault inventories are critically depleted, they will pay any price to secure remaining supply. Price sensitivity disappears when your entire manufacturing operation faces shutdown. I am hearing from metals dealers this morning that industrial buyers are already bidding $120 to $130 per ounce for immediate physical delivery, while the COMEX paper price still shows $103. The two-tier market isn't coming. It's here. The second consequence is the COMEX delivery failure. Under normal market conditions, less than 1% of COMEX silver futures contracts result in physical delivery. Traders buy paper, sell paper, roll positions forward, and never touch actual metal. The system functions because participants treat it as a financial instrument rather than a mechanism for obtaining silver. But these are not normal conditions. When industrial users can't source silver through traditional supply channels, COMEX becomes the backup. When investors watch this crisis unfold and lose faith in paper promises, they stand for delivery to secure real metal before it disappears. My sources inside the exchange indicate that delivery notices are running at approximately 3 times normal volume as of this morning. If that pace continues for another 2 weeks, registered inventory will be exhausted. COMEX will face a binary choice: either source metal from the open market at massive premiums and absorb catastrophic losses, or declare force majeure and settle contracts in cash at the paper price. Either option destroys confidence in the exchange as a functioning market. The third consequence is the ETF redemption crisis. SLV, the iShares Silver Trust, claims to hold approximately 450 million ounces of silver in custodial vaults. PSLV, the Sprott Physical Silver Trust, reports holdings around 180 million ounces. Together, these two funds represent the largest concentrated silver positions in the Western financial system. Millions of retail and institutional investors own shares in these ETFs, believing they have exposure to physical silver. But ETF metal is not truly available to the market. It sits in allocated storage, theoretically segregated from commercial inventory, untouchable unless shareholders redeem. The pressure building right now is toward exactly that redemption. Authorized participants, the large financial institutions that can exchange ETF shares for physical metal, are watching. The premium between paper and physical widen. The arbitrage opportunity is obvious. Redeem shares, take delivery of metal priced at $103, sell it into the physical market at $120. In the past 5 trading days, SLV has experienced redemptions totaling 8.3 million ounces, the largest weekly outflow since the 2021 silver squeeze. If this pace accelerates, the ETFs face a choice between liquidating their metal holdings and suspending redemptions entirely. Neither outcome is good for shareholders who thought they owned silver. The fourth consequence is the permanent price bifurcation between paper and physical markets. For 50 years, the COMEX spot price has served as the global benchmark for silver transactions. Miners price their output against COMEX. Industrial buyers negotiate supply contracts referencing COMEX. Dealers set retail prices as a premium over COMEX spot. The entire ecosystem assumes that paper and physical are interchangeable, that you can convert a COMEX contract into real metal at any time. China's export ban shatters that assumption. When physical silver cannot be sourced at the paper price becomes a fiction maintained purely for financial settlement purposes. I expect we will see COMEX spot trade between $95 and $115 per ounce over the coming weeks, artificially suppressed by speculative short selling and algorithmic trading that treats silver as just another financial instrument. Meanwhile, physical silver, actual metal you can hold and use, will trade between 140 and 180s on dealer markets, peer-to-peer transactions, and international exchanges like Shanghai, where the paper game doesn't dominate. The official price will be meaningless. The real price will be whatever buyers are willing to pay for metal that actually exists. The fifth consequence is the catalyst for monetary repricing that many of us have anticipated for years. Silver has been money for 5,000 years of human civilization. It was only in 1873 that the United States formally demonetized silver in what critics called the Crime of 73. For 150 years since, silver has been systematically suppressed as a monetary metal to protect the fiat currency system from competition. The paper markets were the primary tool of that suppression, allowing infinite paper claims to dilute the price signal from finite physical supply. But what happens when that suppression mechanism fails? What happens when governments can't source silver for critical industrial and defense needs? What happens when the paper market loses all credibility and physical silver trades at multiples of the official price? Silver gets repriced. Not gradually, not incrementally, violently and permanently. We are witnessing the early stages of a monetary reset that will restore silver to its historical role as a store of value and medium of exchange. The price required to reflect that role is not $100 or $150. It is $300. It is $500. Perhaps higher. China's export ban is the match. The fractional reserve fraud is the kindling, and the Western financial system's arrogance is the gasoline. The fire has started. You now understand the situation with clarity that 99% of investors won't achieve until it's too late. You understand the supply chain vulnerability. You understand the strategic timing. You understand the 5 cascading consequences that are already in motion. The only remaining question is what you're going to do with this knowledge in the next 48 hours while the window remains open. I'm going to walk you through exactly what I'm doing with my own portfolio and what I believe the situation demands from anyone paying attention. This is not financial advice. I'm not your advisor and I don't know your circumstances, but I am going to tell you what I would tell my own family if they called me right now asking what to do. The first step is auditing your current exposure to understand exactly where you stand. Most people have no idea how they actually own silver or whether what they own is real. Before making any moves, you need complete clarity. If you own physical silver in your direct possession, coins in a safe, bars in a security deposit box you control, metal you can touch, count the ounces and know exactly where it's stored. If you own silver through a vault, depository, or allocated storage account, identify the institution holding it and understand the terms of your storage agreement. If you own shares in ETFs like SLV or PSLV, calculate your total share count and your cost basis. If you own silver mining stocks, know which companies and whether they're producing mines or exploration projects. If you hold COMEX futures or options, understand your position sizes and expiration dates. Take 15 minutes right now. Write it down. You cannot make intelligent decisions about repositioning until you have a complete picture of what you're repositioning from. The second step is converting paper claims to physical metal as rapidly as possible. If you own silver ETFs, the trade is straightforward but emotionally difficult. You need to sell your shares at market open, accept whatever price the market gives you, and use the proceeds to purchase physical silver from a reputable dealer. Yes, you will lose money on the conversion. The ETF price reflects paper silver at $103, while physical is already trading at $118 or higher. That spread feels like a loss. It's actually insurance. If the ETF suspends redemptions, which becomes increasingly likely as this crisis accelerates, your shares become untradeable. You'll watch the physical price climb to $150, $180, $200 while your brokerage account shows shares you cannot sell and cannot redeem. The small loss you take today prevents the total loss you risk tomorrow. For those holding allocated storage accounts with vault operators, request immediate physical delivery today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today, call them, email them. Create a paper trail documenting your request with timestamps. Vaults are already experiencing elevated delivery requests, and processing times are extending. If you wait until the mainstream financial media picks up this story, you'll be in a queue behind thousands of other clients who all had the same realization simultaneously. The first 3% of clients who request delivery will receive their metal. The remaining 97% will receive excuses, delays, and eventually a cash settlement at a price far below physical market value. The third step is acquiring physical silver regardless of the premium. I understand the psychological resistance to paying $115 for silver when your screen shows a spot price of $103. That $12 premium feels like overpaying. Reframe your thinking. That premium is not a markup. It's the actual price of silver that exists. The spot price is a fiction maintained by a paper market that's in the process of failing. The premium reflects reality. The spot price reflects a leveraged derivative structure running on fumes. Within 2 weeks, that premium will be $30. Within a month, $50 or more. Dealers will implement purchase limits. Popular products will show out of stock indefinitely. The mints will announce allocation delays stretching into months. If you have capital you intend to convert to silver, convert it now while metal is available at any price. Buy American Eagles, Canadian Maples, Austrian Philharmonics, Australian Kangaroos, generic rounds, 10-ounce bars, 100-ounce bars, junk silver bags of pre-1965 U.S. coinage. Product selection is irrelevant. Ounces in your possession is what matters. The fourth step is securing your metal under your direct physical control. Once you've acquired silver, you need to store it somewhere you control completely, not a bank-safe deposit box. Banks can restrict access during financial emergencies and have done so historically. Not a third-party vault, even a reputable one. You've just seen what counterparty risk looks like when a system fails. A quality home safe bolted to your foundation costs between $500 and $2,000 depending on size and fire rating. That's a trivial expense relative to the value you're protecting. For larger holdings, consider geographic diversification across multiple secure locations so that no single point of failure can compromise your entire position. The fifth step is preparing psychologically for volatility that will test your conviction. The next 90 days will be chaotic in ways that shake even experienced investors. Prices will spike violently, then correct sharply, then spike again. Paper markets may halt trading entirely. Dealers may suspend sales during inventory crunches. Government officials will make reassuring statements that contradict observable reality. Financial media will alternate between ignoring the story and catastrophizing it. You will be tempted to doubt your positioning dozens of times. Preparation is the antidote to panic. If you've completed steps 1 through 4, you've already outperformed 95% of investors. Hold your position. Trust your analysis. The chaos is confirmation, not contradiction. Let me paint 3 scenarios for how this crisis resolves over the next 6 to 12 months, because understanding the range of outcomes helps you prepare for whichever one materializes. The first scenario is managed retreat. This is the most probable outcome, perhaps 60%. Likelihood: Western governments and central banks coordinate an emergency response. Strategic petroleum reserve-style stockpiles of silver are released, assuming any exist in meaningful quantities. Diplomatic backchannels open with Beijing exploring exemptions or quotas for critical industries. Export restrictions are imposed on domestically mined silver to prevent metal from flowing to higher-priced Asian markets. In this scenario, the immediate crisis is contained, but the structural damage proves permanent. The paper market survives, but loses credibility. Physical premiums remain elevated at $25 to $40 over spot indefinitely, as investors refuse to trust paper claims. Silver reprices to $150 to $200 per ounce within 6 months as the market adjusts to the new supply reality. Industrial users face higher input costs that flow through to consumer prices. The green energy transition slows as solar economics deteriorate. Life goes on, but the world has changed. The second scenario is systemic failure. This carries perhaps 30% probability and represents the outcome if the crisis escalates beyond containment. COMEX declares force majeure on silver contracts, settling obligations in cash rather than metal. One or more major LBMA vault operators default on allocated storage redemptions, triggering investigations and litigation. SLV and PSLV suspend redemptions, trapping shareholders in positions they cannot exit. The paper-silver market effectively ceases to function as a price discovery mechanism. In this scenario, silver trades exclusively in physical markets, peer-to-peer transactions, international exchanges, and dealer networks operating outside the failed paper infrastructure. Prices reach $200 to $300 within months, as the decades of suppressed demand meets constrained supply without the paper market to absorb the pressure. Legal battles over vault fraud continue for years. Regulatory investigations produce reports that confirm what we already knew. The system broke because it was designed to break. The third scenario is government intervention. This carries perhaps 10% probability, but represents the tail risk that cannot be ignored. If the silver crisis threatens critical defense production, essential industrial capacity, or broader financial system stability, governments may invoke emergency powers. Silver could be declared a strategic resource subject to price controls, export prohibitions, or mandatory sale requirements. The nightmare version of this scenario resembles Executive Order 61002 from 1933, when private gold ownership was effectively criminalized and citizens were forced to surrender their metal to the government at below-market prices. I rate this outcome as unlikely but not impossible. If you hold substantial silver positions, geographic diversification across multiple jurisdictions provides insurance against political risk concentrated in any single country. Regardless of which scenario unfolds, the trajectory is identical for those holding physical metal in their own possession. The value of real silver, metal you can touch, metal with no counterparty, metal that exists, increases substantially from current levels. The only variable is magnitude and timeline. Let me bring everything together because we've covered extensive ground. China has imposed an immediate export ban on refined silver to the entire Western alliance. This eliminates 43% of refined supply from economies consuming 60% of global silver. Western vault inventories represent approximately 3 weeks of available supply, and the paper markets are leveraged at ratios that guarantee delivery failure under stress. The industrial panic has started. The COMEX delivery crisis is building. The paper physical price divergence is widening daily. And the window for repositioning from paper claims to physical metal is measured in days, not weeks. Silver just broke 103. It's going much higher. But the only silver that matters when this is over is the silver you hold in your hands. China made their move. The West has no metal left. Now you know. And knowing creates obligation. Act accordingly.